right, here's the model number if you need parts for this machine. Just checking to make sure the fuel isn't stale, checking the oil level, and gonna make sure there's no fuel in the oil. Very important. These machines will not run on old rotten fuel. If it smells like varnish, you need to drain it.
Yeah, she's not very happy.
You could hear how it was running. It was surging up and down pretty bad. The motor's starving for fuel, and so the governor's fighting back on it. So it's definitely having a fuel issue or a carburetor issue. So we're gonna dive into it here. You can see that this is a thermal choke system, and that plastic rod needs to be between those two steel rods when you reassemble this. If you get it wrong in front of one of those steel rods, they will not start or run right. This one is a little bit frustrating. You have to pull the recoil starter to get that choke rod out of the choke plate system on the carburetor. So you got to pull the whole top cover. It's kind of ridiculous how they manufactured this, but you got to do it. You can't force that out, or you might break the choke assembly on top of the carb. You definitely have to clamp the fuel hose before you pull the line off of the carburetor, or gas is going to go everywhere. Make sure you don't clamp the hose too tight, just clamp it enough to stop the flow. And the cover's off of there. There is the fan choke system. And so the choke is fully engaged until that fan builds up enough airflow to turn the choke off, which is right when it starts. You got to pull this fan rod off to get it out of the carburetor, and then the carburetor will easily come off. So this carburetor bowl looks pretty good. We're gonna check that the float valve moves and it's not varnished. That looks pretty good. The choke plate looks freed up. That looks pretty good. Everything looks pretty clean on this carburetor. We're gonna pull that idle screw off of there. You should count the turns before you pull it off on most machines. There's the idle jet. And you're gonna wanna make sure that idle jet orifice is clear. It's tiny little orifice. I don't have anything small enough, so I'm going to use this wire brush to clear it. This one cleared really easy. Sometimes you really got to force that orifice there. And then here's the main jet we're going to clear with some welding tip cleaners. You're going to start small and work your way up. And I'm going to ream it out quite a bit here just to make sure that it is clear. If you get the machine back together and it still surges, that means you didn't clear that jet out enough. I'm gonna clean all these orifices out with some carburetor cleaner, some acetone cleaner, the good flammable stuff. Don't get too much of this on your O-rings or it will ruin your O-rings. If I get it on any of the O-rings, I'll quickly spray those O-rings with WD-40 just so they don't swell and become ruined. Here's the float valve. That looks pretty good. No need to clean it. It looks fine. I'm going to ream this main jet again. This carburetor looks pretty good. These are pretty prone to clogging in the main jet and on the pilot. Couldn't tell you why, but we clean more of these carburetors than anything else. Now we're going to blow out these orifices with some compressed air. The only thing you don't want to do is blow out the inlet of the fuel, because it can blow out that float valve seat. I always blow it out on the float valve seat side and not the fuel inlet side. I've had those seats come flying out before, and then you got to buy a new carburetor. Make sure everything's clean, especially make sure that float valve is clean when you put it back in, or they will leak fuel. Make sure the float bowl is free of sediment. No need to over tighten anything. Make sure that seal is there on the bottom of that bolt. Getting some WD on these O-rings on this pilot jet before it goes in. Gonna tap it in, and since there's no idle or a throttle adjustment on this machine, there's really no reason to count the turns on this idle screw. So I'm just gonna turn it until the tip comes out of the end, and that should be just fine. If there is a throttle on the machine, then you absolutely need to count the turns on that idle screw before you remove it. I always like to purge the line before I reconnect it to the carburetor, just in case any sediment got to the end of the wet line. You definitely don't want any sediment going into the carburetor. All the fuel going into the carb needs to be clean, and so I'll purge the line just a little bit before I connect it there. Okay, now the clamp is off and fuel is going into the carb. We need to be watching the carburetor, make sure no fuel comes rushing out of the face. If we're getting fuel rushing out of the face of the carburetor or any of the orifices, or if it's leaking, something is wrong. Everything should be dry at this point. I'm going to give it a few taps just to make sure everything, the float valve and the float is working properly. And it looks like this carburetor is dry. Everything looks good. We're going back together. All right, moment of truth here. Let's see what happens. This one sounds great. If your machine has only a thermal choke, you want to let it run for 5 minutes and make sure it still runs smooth. But everything went good. Another happy customer.